Welcome back to another deep dive. When you picture a long-haul truck driver, your mind probably goes straight to a very specific set of images, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, usually it's the classic country music playing softly.
Right. The country music, maybe a crackling CB radio, and, just a lone figure looking out over this long stretch of empty midnight highway.
Yeah, it's a deeply romanticized picture, really, of a traditional blue-collar industry.
It is. But, and this is the crazy part, we are completely dismantling that image today because the cab of a modern 18-wheeler has quietly transformed. It's basically become a high-level rolling command center for business
It
intelligence.
really has. The stereotype of the isolated driver it doesn't survive contact with modern reality anymore.
Not at all. So today we're pulling from this fascinating piece of research. It's an excerpt titled The Pulse of the Highway, Modern Trucking Information Networks. And our mission here is to explore how a traditionally offline industry built this massive, sophisticated digital information ecosystem.
And, more importantly, what this reveals about the future of professional knowledge, really, no matter what field you happen to work in.
Exactly, which is why I'm so glad to have you here to guide us through this.
Thanks for having me. I mean, my main takeaway from the text is that knowledge is only powerful when it's understood and applied in the moment.
Right.
And what we are seeing on the highways isn't just a workforce passively consuming media to pass the time. It's a masterclass in how an entire industry is applying a massive influx of data to survive, adapt, and basically outmaneuver complex economic shifts in real time.
Okay, let's unpack this, because to really appreciate the sheer scale of this shift, we have to understand that the physical limitations of, the old way that information traveled.
Yeah, let's rewind a couple decades.
Right, so if you were an independent driver or a small fleet owner back then, and you needed to figure out where freight was moving or what the current market rates were, or heck, even just how to fix a recurring mechanical issue.
Your options were severely restricted by physical geography.
Exactly. You were reliant on, like, physical trade magazines that were out of date by the time they even got printed.
Oh, definitely. And bulletin boards at truck stops or just word-of-mouth conversations at the diner counter.
Yeah.
The transmission of knowledge was fundamentally localized and highly fragmented. I mean, if a driver in West Texas figured out a brilliant mechanical workaround for a specific engine issue,
Or, like, formulated a better way to calculate their fuel surcharge or something.
right, that insight was trapped.
Yeah.
It might only reach the three other drivers they happened to share a pot of coffee with that morning.
Wow.
The rest of the industry was basically left in the dark, forced to figure out that exact same problem entirely from scratch.
But the reality today is an absolute explosion of digital platforms, and they completely bypass physical geography. I mean, we are talking about a massive ecosystem of independent content creators on YouTube, sprawling podcast networks, digital trade journals, incredibly specific industry newsletters.
And the crucial detail here is the identity
Hmm.
of these modern creators.
Yeah, these aren't traditional media personalities broadcasting from some shiny studio in New York.
No, they are active, working professionals. They're fleet owners, dispatchers, safety experts, freight brokers, and, of course, the drivers themselves.
They're the people actually doing the job, holding the steering wheel and sharing their raw, boots on the ground experiences.
What's fascinating here is the sheer democratization of knowledge taking place.
Yeah.
Because in the past, the barrier to entry for understanding the granular economics of trucking was incredibly high. You essentially had to learn the business of freight through trial and error.
Which is terrifying. I mean, in an industry defined by incredibly thin profit margins and massive overhead costs, trial and error is a financially devastating way to operate.
One miscalculated route or a poorly negotiated contract could sink a small operation entirely.
Right? But now, because active professionals are broadcasting their daily realities, that proprietary industry knowledge is out there. It's serving as an absolute lifeline for new drivers and small business trucking operators.
It's totally shifted the landscape.
It reminds me so much of the open source software movement.
Oh, that's an interesting comparison.
Yeah. Think about how software developers share their raw code on platforms like GitHub to elevate the whole community, finding bugs and building solutions together.
Right.
We are seeing the exact same dynamic on the highway. You have veteran, highly successful owner-operators essentially open sourcing their internal business metrics.
Yeah, they're putting their exact cost per mile calculations, their fuel efficiency data, and maintenance schedules online for literally everyone to see.
Exactly. And you have fleet owners hopping on camera to discuss the exact strategies they use to retain drivers in a competitive market. They are making their hard-earned proprietary knowledge public for the benefit of the entire network.
And the mechanism is identical to open source. By decentralizing the information and removing the gatekeepers, the entire network becomes more robust.
Yeah, because when a fleet manager publicly shares a successful strategy for reducing driver turnover, they aren't just helping a competitor across the country.
No, they are raising the baseline standard for the entire labor market. It accelerates the evolutionary pace of the industry because everyone is suddenly building on top of everyone else's successes.
Rather than repeating their failures.
Exactly.
So the natural question then is how this massive volume of information is actually being consumed. Because, the medium fundamentally shapes the message. We have to look at the two major platforms reshaping the day-to-day life of a trucker, which are YouTube and podcasts.
And they serve very different but completely complementary purposes.
Right, because YouTube acts as this visual, unofficial training ground. It's stepping in to complement formal education and carrier training programs.
Because visual learning is non-negotiable for certain aspects of this profession. Drivers are using YouTube to learn the intricate details of truck maintenance, pre-trip inspection compliance, safe securing of loads.
Oh, for sure.
The popular channels are producing these incredibly detailed, high-definition videos covering everything from, like, walk-around reviews of brand-new sleeper cabs to step-by-step tutorials on diagnosing a faulty air valve.
Which makes perfect sense. I mean, if you're a new entrant to the industry and you're about to drop $150,000 on a piece of heavy equipment, you can't just read a brochure.
No, you need to see the blind spots. You need to actually see how the engine block is laid out.
Right. But the obvious limitation of YouTube is that you absolutely cannot watch a visual tutorial while you are hauling 80,000 pounds of freight down the interstate at 70 miles an hour.
Right, audio takes over the moment the parking brake is released.
Yeah.
Podcasts have integrated themselves seamlessly into the trucking lifestyle, specifically because of the sheer volume of time these professionals spend behind the wheel.
Because instead of consuming information visually while parked, drivers are actively listening and learning while they are generating revenue.
Exactly.
Here's where it gets really interesting. I want you to think about your own morning commute. Are you using that 30 minutes on the train or that hour sitting in traffic to fundamentally upgrade your professional skills the way these drivers are?
That's a great question.
Because the research describes these truck paths as mobile classrooms. You've got a driver in Nebraska listening to a 2-hour interview with a carrier executive, a safety expert, or an industry economist, taking in all this high-level strategic thinking without ever taking their eyes off the road.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, what we are seeing is the radical transformation of dead time into a massive competitive advantage.
Dead time into a competitive advantage. I like that.
Yeah, because long-haul driving used to mandate hours of cognitive isolation. Now it's an opportunity for intensive, specialized education. And audio formats provide a level of nuance that simply does not exist in formal written reports.
Right, because a memo from a regulatory body is going to be totally sanitized. It's just going to be a dry list of bullet points.
Exactly. A corporate memo isn't going to tell you how a new rule actually feels to implement on a Tuesday afternoon at a crowded, chaotic loading dock.
But an unedited, long-form conversation between two veteran owner operators, that's going to give you all the context. You hear their tone, their hesitation, their frustration.
And you hear the actual practical workarounds they've developed. A really great example of this from the text is how the industry handled massive technological mandates, like the rollout of electronic logging devices, or ELDs.
Oh, man. Yeah, the ELD mandate.
Right. It was a paradigm shift that fundamentally altered how hours of service were tracked, moving from paper logbooks to digital systems. And it caused immense anxiety across the workforce.
But the digital information networks acted as a collective processing mechanism, right?
Yes. Before operators actually had to install the hardware and comply with the regulations, the topic was dissected from every conceivable angle on podcasts and independent channels.
And the same rapid collective digestion of complex topics is happening right now, isn't it? Like with the adoption of electric trucks, alternative fuels, and artificial intelligence in route planning.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The workforce adapts faster because the media platforms break down these paradigm-shifting changes in real time.
Right. Now, the sheer size of this ecosystem means there is content for everyone, from the first-year driver to the seasoned freight broker. And that requires an incredibly tailored approach to intelligence.
It does. Because a company driver cannot be listening to the same things for the same reasons as a corporate executive sitting in an office in Chicago.
The utility of the information completely shifts depending on where you sit in the supply chain.
Take drivers, for instance. They're leveraging industry content to stay informed about shifting federal regulations, to learn advanced fuel-efficient driving techniques, or to discover safer operating practices in severe weather.
But it's not just the day-to-day operations. They're using it for career mobility.
Yes, they're researching the culture of potential employers, understanding regional compensation trends, and figuring out which carriers actually respect their drivers' time.
Then you have the owner-operators who are playing a completely different, much more high-stakes game.
Oh, absolutely. An owner-operator is a one-person enterprise.
They aren't just holding the steering wheel. They are the chief financial officer, the head mechanic, the dispatcher, and the compliance officer all rolled into one.
And they're using this digital network to understand macro freight markets, monitor their operating costs, evaluate long-term equipment purchases, stay ahead of tax requirements.
For an owner-operator, this information is not an optional podcast they listen to for fun. It is treated as a core business asset. It's as vital to their survival as the diesel in their tanks.
And scaling up from the individual owner-operators, you have the large carriers and fleet managers. Their focus shifts entirely from the micro to the macro.
Yeah, large fleets are monitoring these platforms to gauge the temperature of the labor market. They want to know what drivers are complaining about, what they're praising, what retention strategies are actually working for competing fleets.
They use the collective data to evaluate new fleet management technologies and benchmark their own operational efficiency against the broader industry standard.
And finally, we have the freight brokers. Brokers are operating in a highly volatile, split-second environment where market information directly dictates their profitability.
A broker needs to track freight capacity changes in real time.
Right. Like if a massive storm system is moving through the Pacific Northwest, a broker needs to know instantly how that will impact available truck capacity and regional spot market rates.
They are constantly monitoring economic indicators and compliance issues to maintain a tangible competitive advantage.
But hold on. Let me stop here and push back on this a bit.
Sure, please do.
Because if I am an owner-operator, let's say I'm driving 10 hours a day, I have to perform preventative maintenance on my rig in the evening, I have to negotiate my next load, and I have to manage my quarterly taxes.
Right.
If I am supposed to also be consuming hundreds of hours of podcasts, YouTube videos, and market reports just to maintain this core business asset,
Right.
well, wait, isn't that just a direct path to severe information overload?
Oh, it absolutely is.
How does a single human being process that fire hose of data without completely burning out?
It's a very valid concern. Information overload is a massive vulnerability in any complex system. But the industry didn't just create a wall of noise. It actually developed a highly effective filtration mechanism.
Okay, what is it?
To combat the sheer volume of podcast and video content, the ecosystem heavily relies on the power of curated newsletters.
Really, the classic email newsletter.
Yeah.
It feels almost old school compared to the rest of this digital explosion.
It might feel old school, but it is incredibly efficient. Well-curated email newsletters have become the essential antidote to information fatigue.
Yeah.
Professionals who need concise, actionable intelligence without the massive time commitment rely on them to synthesize all that noise into signal.
So like a high-quality newsletter might aggregate national diesel price fluctuations, summarize a 100-page federal regulatory mandate into 3 readable bullet points, and highlight the week's critical freight market trends.
Exactly. It allows an operator to glance at their phone for 5 minutes while drinking their morning coffee and basically gain hours worth of synthesized research.
Okay, that structural balance makes a lot of sense. You leverage the long-form audio for the deep, nuanced context while you're actually driving your route, and you rely on the punchy, curated newsletter to give you the executive summary when you're doing your bookkeeping at night. It's a very efficient system. But that brings us to, I think, the most dangerous challenge in this entire digital evolution. We are talking about an ecosystem populated by independent creators, unedited podcast conversations, and social media algorithms.
Yes.
With so much content out there, and let's be honest, much of it just reacting to or summarizing other people's content, how does a professional separate fact from fiction?
It's tough.
Because in the business of heavy freight, we aren't arguing over the best way to bake a cake. We are talking about millions of dollars, federal compliance, and human safety.
The trust spectrum is the critical fault line of modern media, and the trucking industry is acutely aware of the risk here. Because the inherent danger of relying solely on decentralized platforms is that the algorithm inherently rewards engagement, entertainment, and controversy over factual accuracy.
Right. A solo creator might offer a piece of advice based purely on personal opinion, or worse, a total misunderstanding of the law.
And if it's packaged in an entertaining way, it can go incredibly viral.
So, what does this all mean? The stakes couldn't be higher. Let's say a viral video suggests a creative new shortcut for logging your hours of service, or claims a specific tax deduction is totally legal.
Right.
If an owner-operator follows that advice without verifying it, they aren't just going to be embarrassed. They could face catastrophic federal fines, lose their commercial driver's license, and literally bankrupt their small business overnight.
This raises an important question about media literacy and how industries protect themselves from bad information.
Yeah, how do they?
The solution developed within this ecosystem is a fascinating, highly effective hybrid model. Alongside the explosion of independent creators, there is a continued reliance on and dominance of established trade journals.
Ah, right. Publications like Transport Topics, Fleet Owner, Overdrive, Heavy Duty Trucking, and Today's Trucking in Canada. They serve as the anchor of truth.
Exactly. Unlike an independent creator who might just be chasing views, these trade publications employ actual professional journalists, data analysts, and regulatory experts.
People whose core function is rigorous verification.
Yes, they provide the professional reporting and the deep market analysis that fact-checks all those rumors swirling around the truck stops and the YouTube comment sections.
The research highlights a perfect real-world example of why this hybrid model is vital. Think back to when the pandemic-era freight boom finally softened.
Right when the spot rates, the price paid to move freight on demand, started to plummet.
Yeah, the businesses that survived that crash weren't flying blind, but they also weren't the ones making panic-driven decisions based on some sensationalized TikTok video.
No, the companies that successfully adjusted their pricing strategies and controlled their costs were the ones utilizing a hybrid intelligence network.
Because the most successful strategy isn't binary. It is not a choice between new media and old media.
Exactly. The operators who thrive are combining the practical, on-the-ground, visceral insights of independent creators with the verified, rigorous reporting of established industry publications.
Right. So you need the independent driver on YouTube to show you the reality of a new engine sensor constantly failing in cold weather.
Yes, but you rely on the professional trade journal to explain the macroeconomic forces driving the manufacturer's eventual recall and what it actually means for your warranty.
You cross-reference the boots-on-the-ground anecdote with the verified macro data analysis.
Precisely.
Looking ahead, it is completely clear that this digital infrastructure is only going to become more deeply embedded in the physical reality of moving freight.
Oh, absolutely. Content creators, podcast networks, trade journals, and newsletters have evolved way past simply sharing information. They are now critical infrastructure within the North American supply chain.
Yeah, they're directly influencing which trucks get purchased, how routes are optimized, and how multi-million-dollar businesses perform quarter after quarter.
And that evolution is accelerating. The networks of the near future will integrate artificial intelligence, predictive analytics, and real-time freight intelligence alongside traditional journalism and podcasting.
The professionals who succeed will rely on a seamless blend of instantaneous algorithmic data and nuanced human reporting to make their business decisions.
Because the capacity to continuously synthesize and apply targeted information is the ultimate competitive advantage in a complex market.
Information is no longer an optional resource to just pass the time. It is the very road they drive on.
Well said. The companies and individuals who dedicate themselves to continuous learning from reliable sources are the ones who adapt and survive when the market turns.
It's an incredibly powerful lesson in professional evolution. Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive into the rolling command centers of the modern highway.
My pleasure.
As we leave you today, consider this final thought. If long-haul truckers are leveraging mobile classrooms, specialized newsletters, and real-time data networks to outmaneuver complex market shifts while piloting 80,000 pounds of steel down the interstate, what untapped information networks exist in your industry that you are currently ignoring? Keep learning, and we'll see you on the next deep dive.